For 135 years, I remained hidden in this quiet fishing village, growing strong, unseen. But when the sea itself rose with monsters, I had to become the village's shield. The old man's weathered hands gripped the fishing net, hauling in the morning's catch like he had done for over a century. The villagers of Saltmire knew him only as Old Hatting, the quiet elder who arrived before any of them were born, who never aged, who always sat at the pier watching the horizon with knowing eyes. None of them suspected that beneath his salt-stained robes, a power capable of splitting the ocean itself lay dormant. Today, the sea churned black. Today, something ancient was waking beneath the waves. And, after 135 years of hiding, Hatting's hand moved instinctively to the glowing aqua key hanging beneath his shirt, the key he'd sworn never to use again. The net came up heavy with silver sides. Hatting sorted them with mechanical precision, his calloused fingers working, while his eyes scanned the horizon. The familiar interface flickered at the edge of his vision, invisible to anyone but him. Tidal cultivation system accumulated tide points, 49,275,831 depth, 99.9% primordial tier, locked current, 99.9% primordial tier, locked pressure, 99.9% primordial tier, locked tempest, 99.9% primordial tier, locked activation requirement, genuine mortal threat status, dormant 135 years of mending nets, of weathering storms, of watching generations of Saltmire's children grow old and die, while he remained unchanged, all of it converted into power he couldn't touch. He tossed a fish into the basket. The system had been his curse and his comfort, proof that his survival meant something, even if that meaning remained forever out of reach. Old Hatting. He turned. Yansu strode down the pier, her short black hair whipping in the salt wind. She stopped 3 feet away, arms crossed, suspicion carved into every line of her face. That boat. She pointed to the overturned vessel near the rocks. I saw you ride it this morning. Did you? Hatting smiled, reaching for another fish. These old bones still have some use. It took 6 men to flip it last week. You did it with one hand. He shrugged. The angle was better today. Yansu stepped closer. Her eyes narrowed. Your eyes just flashed, like the deep water when the sun hits it. Hatting's hand paused over the net. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the mask slipped, just a fraction. Then he chuckled and held up a dried squid. You've been working too hard. Seat. Eat. She didn't take it, but she didn't push further either. Smart girl. She'd inherited her grandfather's instincts, the old songs he used to hum that held more power than anyone in Saltmire realized. A horn blast echoed across the harbor. Both of them turned. A skiff cut through the morning waves, its sail bearing the crimson trident of the tide hunters. A man stood at the prow in armor made from monster scales, a crackling harpoon strapped to his back. Chunwoo. Hatting recognized the type before the man even docked. Trench-tier cultivator, probably the strongest warrior within 100 miles, and absolutely certain of it. The tide hunter leaped onto the pier before his skiff finished mooring. He landed with deliberate force, cracking a plank. I am Chunwoo, dispatched by the regional lords. Who speaks for this village? Yansu stepped forward. I do for now. What do you want? Chunwoo's eyes swept over her dismissively, then across the weathered buildings of Saltmire. The lords detected spiritual anomalies emanating from this coastline. Something has been broadcasting power for decades. His gaze landed on Hatting. Old man, you've been here longest. Have you seen anything unusual? Hatting offered the dried squid. Only the fish, young master. They've been biting well this season. Chun was lip-curled. Senile fool. He turned back to Yansu. I'll be conducting a survey. Prepare lodging. And keep this decrepit elder away from me. I don't have patience for village idiots. Hatting watched him go, still holding the squid. Yansu caught his eye. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement that neither fully understood. That night, the fish stopped biting. Hatting sat at the pier's edge, watching the water. The sea had turned black, not with storm clouds, but with absence. as if the light itself refused to touch the surface. No fish jumped. No crabs scuttled along the rocks. Even the gulls had fled inland. Elder Mokrin's voice echoed in his memory, sharp, as a day she pressed the aqua key into his hands, while their sect burned around them. When the depths go silent, the lords are listening. He'd been 16. Then, terrified, weak. He wasn't weak anymore. His hand moved beneath his shirt, finding the key. It pulsed warm against his palm, the first time in decades. Something was coming. Something that had felt his accumulated power across all those years, drawn like a shark to blood. The harbor water began to drain. Hadding stood. Villagers emerged from their homes, pointing, shouting. Yansu sprinted toward him, but he barely heard her voice. His eyes were fixed on what the receding tide revealed. A curved spine, bone-white, rising from the harbor floor like a mountain emerging from a sea. It went on, impossibly long, barnacles the size of houses clinging to its surface. His system blazed to life. Threat detected classification. Drowned Lord, primordial entity, mortal threat confirmed, initiating emergency, unlock. Primordial tier achieved, the words burned in his vision like fire. 135 years of dormant power flooded through him all at once. Hadding's eyes flashed with the light of the deep ocean, and for the first time since his sect fell, he let the mask drop completely. The spine kept rising. The spine finished rising. What emerged from the harbor defied every nightmare Hadding had witnessed in 135 years. 7 feet of translucent horror, bioluminescent veins pulsing beneath skin like wet glass. Lidless eyes burned sickly green, as the pale warden opened its mouth and screamed. The scream wasn't sound. It was a command. Razor fins exploded from the water in sheets of silver and teeth. Hundreds of them, each the size of a hunting dog, pouring onto Saltmire's docks like a living flood. Old Dagon was the first to die. The fisherman who'd shared his lunch with Hadding just yesterday. The swarm tore him apart in 3 seconds. 2 more fishermen fell before they could even run. Villagers screamed. Children wailed. The organized chaos of a fishing morning became blind panic, as people fled toward the cliffs, trampling each other in their desperation. Back! Get back! Chunwoo exploded past Hadding in a blur of crackling energy. His lightning-infused harpoon carved through the air, and Hadding had to admit, the Tide Hunter wasn't weak. Thunderbolt Harpoon Technique. A perfect execution. 12 razor fins burst into charred meat simultaneously. But Chunwoo was looking at the wrong enemy. The Leviathan's tentacle came from the harbor like a battering ram. It caught Chunwoo mid-technique and sent him through the wall of the harbormaster's building. The structure collapsed. Dust and splinters erupted. Chunwoo didn't get up. Hadding watched the Tide Hunter lie broken in the rubble, his proud armor cracked, blood streaming from his mouth. The man who'd mocked him, as a senile fisherman, now stared at the sky with the hollow eyes of someone whose entire worldview had just shattered. Trench tier cultivation, the supposed elite of what remained. After the sect war, and a single tentacle had ended him. The tavern. Everyone to the tavern. Yansa's voice cut through the panic like a blade. She'd grabbed a boat hook and was physically shoving villagers toward the sturdiest building in town. Her eyes met Hadding's across the carnage, and he saw it. The question she'd been holding back for years finally demanding an answer. But she didn't ask. She turned and kept saving lives. 3 men helped her barricade the door. Women pulled children through windows. And then Yansu did something that made Hadding's breath catch. She started singing. Her grandfather's old song. The one she'd always dismissed. As superstition, a lullaby for storms. But the words weren't nonsense. They were fragments of warding magic older than the sect war itself. The razor fins that had been charging the tavern flinched. They circled the building's edge, but couldn't approach, hissing and snapping at an invisible barrier. She doesn't even know what she's doing. Hadding almost smiled. Saltmire protected her grandfather's legacy without understanding it. He walked forward. The chaos parted around him. Razor fins that had been tearing fishermen apart moments ago hesitated when he passed. They could feel it, the pressure bleeding off his body like heat from a forge. 135 years of accumulated tide points flooding through a system finally unlocked. Every day of mending nets, every hour of patience, every sunrise watched alone, mourning what he'd lost, building what he'd found. The system had converted all. Core attributes unlocked, depth, primordial current, primordial pressure, primordial tempest, primordial. The Pale Warden's eyes fixed on him. Those lidless, glowing orbs narrowed with something that might have been recognition. You. Its voice echoed like sounds heard underwater. Beautiful and wrong. You are the beacon that woke me. The drowned lord tilted its head, translucent skin rippling. For decades I felt it. Power accumulating in this forgotten place. I thought it was a rift to the deep, but it was just a man, having stopped walking. 30 feet from the entity. Around them, the battle continued. Screams, blood, monsters pouring from the sea. But in this space, nothing else existed. I was trying to hide, Hadding said quietly. You failed. Elder Makran pressed the aqua key into his hands, blood streaming from her mouth. Run. Hide. Grow strong enough to protect what matters. Survive, Hadding. Survive. He had, for 135 years. And now survival required something else. Yes, Hadding agreed. I did. His system blazed. Activating. Abyssal pressure domain. The world compressed. Every razor fin within 50 meters slammed into the cobblestones like invisible mountains had fallen on them. Their bodies flattened. Bones snapped. Silver scales cracked and split. The gravitational force of the ocean's deepest trenches manifested in the middle of Salt Myers Market Square. Villagers at the tavern windows pressed their faces against the glass, watching in mute shock. Chunwoo pushed himself upright in the rubble, broken ribs grinding, unable to look away. Old Hadding, the quiet fisherman who'd lived here longer than anyone's grandparents could remember, stood at the center of a crater of crushed monsters, his white hair floating upward like he was underwater. His eyes glowed the color of the deep ocean. The Pale Warden studied the carnage. Then it laughed. The sound was like drowning, water filling lungs, the last bubbles escaping toward unreachable light. Interesting. The sea behind it erupted. 3 more leviathans rose from the harbor, their building-sized forms blocking out the morning sun. Tentacles thick as ancient trees, eyes burning with the cold light of the abyssal deep. One old man against the tide itself. The Pale Warden spread its arms, commanding its army. Show me what a century of hiding has earned you. Hadding's white hair continued floating upward. His eyes blazed solid blue. No pupil, no white, just the endless color of the deepest water. The aqua key at his chest began to glow. The first leviathan lunged with a tentacle thick as a fishing boat. Hadding raised his palm. The air compressed. A sphere of crushing force bloomed outward from his hand, and the tentacle simply ceased to exist, pulped in a mist by pressure that shouldn't exist above water. The shockwave rippled across the harbor, turning the swarm of razor fins behind the leviathan into clouds of red paste. Silence. Then screaming. The villagers who'd frozen mid-evacuation watched the old man they'd known for 3 generations float 6 feet above the ruined dock. His white hair drifted upward like seaweed in a current. His eyes blazed solid blue. Endless, depthless wrong. Old Hadding, someone whispered. He didn't hear them. Couldn't afford to. The second leviathan struck from his left. Hadding pivoted, driving his fist forward without contact. A gravity well erupted between his knuckles and the creature's skull, crushing the monster's head inward like a clay pot under a boot. The body collapsed, sending waves crashing over the remaining docks. 3 down, 3 rising. The Pale Warden watched from the water's edge, its bioluminescent veins pulsing with what might have been excitement. Fascinating. Continue. Yansu found Chunwoo under a collapsed fish-drying rack, his fancy monster-scale armor cracked down the center and blood running from his nose. His lightning harpoon lay shattered 3 feet away. Get up. She grabbed his collar and hauled. He was heavier than he looked. That's impossible. His eyes were fixed on the harbor, on the old fisherman tearing apart building-sized monsters with his bare hands. No mortal vicis primordialtir. The cultivation manuals call it theoretical, a mathematical ceiling, not an achievable state. She slapped him. The crack echoed off the stone. My village is dying. Jance's voice cut like a gutting knife. You're a tide hunter. So hunt. Something shifted in Chunwa's expression. Shame, maybe, or the first crack in a lifetime of arrogance. He grabbed a splintered oar from the rubble. I'll need a weapon. Find one. She was already moving, dragging a bleeding fisherman toward the cliff path. And stay out of his way. The pale warden raised both arms. The sea answered. Water exploded over Saltmire's seawall, not waves, but a deliberate flood. Seawater summoned directly from the abyssal deep, cold enough to stop hearts, carrying the weight of crushing depths. It slammed through the village streets, tearing apart homes that had stood for centuries. Hadding landed in the central square, as the water reached his ankles, then his knees, then his chest. Whirlpools erupted around him. 3, 5, 7 spinning vortexes that ripped apart the temple. The Elder Hall, the childhood home of a girl named Yansu who once brought him rice cakes on cold mornings. I've been hiding, he thought. For 135 years, I watched generations live and die, while I pretended to be ordinary. The thought lasted 1 second. Then he moved, his tempest attribute, maxed through decades of enduring storms, of reading currents, of understanding water better than any living creature, surged outward. The flood reversed. Every drop of summoned seawater answered to him now, and he threw it back at its master in a wall of crushing force. The pale warden staggered. You! Its voice bubbled with genuine surprise. You command the current? I've spent 135 years reading it. Hadding's voice was soft, almost sad. I know water better than you know your own dead heart. The memory hit him between one heartbeat and the next. Elder Mokran's face, beautiful and dying, blood soaking her white robes, as the sect burned around them, her hands pressing the aqua key into his palms. Live long enough to protect what matters. He'd lived. He'd hidden. He'd fished and smiled and pretended, while the world bled without him. The guilt cracked something open in his chest. Not weakness, release. The pale warden moved faster than physics should allow. A lance of compressed water, dense as steel, punched through Hadding's shoulder before he could react. He gasped. Blood sprayed, red against the blue glow of his eyes. The drowned lord's face split in what might have been a smile. You bleed. Its voice echoed with wonder. You truly are mortal. How delicious. Hadding gripped the water lance embedded in his flesh. It should have been agony. It was. He'd felt worse. Mortal, he agreed. But I've had 135 years to grow stronger than anything mortal should be. The wound began closing. His pressure a tribute, refined through a century of hauling nets in storms that would kill ordinary men, regenerated tissue faster than the drowned lord could process. Muscle knit, skin sealed. But something else was happening. The aqua key at his chest, the last gift of his dead master, cracked. Light erupted skyward, a pillar of blue-white radiance that pierced the storm clouds, visible for miles in every direction. The beacon of something ancient, something hungry, something that had been sleeping inside that key for longer than human civilization had existed. The pale warden's expression shifted. Not anger, hunger, the ocean's inheritance. Its voice trembled with need. You carry a drowned lord's heart. The light intensified. The key cracked further. Give it to me. The key shattered. Light poured into Hadding's skull like molten silver. And suddenly he wasn't in the harbor anymore. He was standing in the burning ruins of the Cerulean Tide sect, watching Elder Mokran press something into his younger self's hands. They came for this. Her voice echoed across a century. The Abyssal Church. They worship what's inside, the crystallized heart of a drowned lord who died before humans learned to sail. The memory shifted. Cultists in black robes carved through his sect brothers. A drowned lord's shadow loomed over the temple. Elder Mokran's final technique bought him 3 seconds to flee. The heart chose you, Hadding. It's been growing inside that key for 135 years, feeding on your accumulated power. The vision collapsed. Hadding slammed back into his body, into the harbor, into the screaming present, and understood. His sect hadn't died in the sect war. They'd been sacrificed for what he carried. Give it to me. The pale warden lunged. Lightning cracked across its face. Chunwu stood 30 feet away, one arm hanging useless, ribs visibly displaced beneath his armor. Blood sheeted down his face. But his good arm hurled another thunderbolt harpoon, forcing the drowned lord to deflect. Old man, his voice cracked with pain. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Behind him, Yansu's voice rose over the chaos. She was singing. The old warding songs her grandfather taught her. Fragments of protection magic she'd never believed were real, poured from her throat in a desperate flood. The sound rippled outward. Razor fins flinched. A leviathan preparing to crush the evacuation boats hesitated, confused by harmonics that predated human language. Two more leviathans surfaced near the harbor mouth. A fresh wave of razor fins boiled up from the depths. The Pale Warden's reinforcements had arrived. Insufficient. The drowned lord's voice dripped contempt. Your allies by you heartbeats. I will take centuries. Hadding looked at Chunwu broken, but fighting. At Yansu, throat raw, still singing. At the fishing boats, packed with villagers he'd watched grow from children to grandparents. 135 years of hiding. Of pretending he wasn't what he was. Of letting his sex sacrifice mean nothing. But his own survival. Elder Mokran's final words echoed. Survive and grow strong enough to protect others. He'd done the first part. Time for the second. System, Hadding said quietly. Activate Ocean's inheritance. Confirmation required. Ocean's inheritance will consume all accumulated tide points. 135 years of cultivation will be converted to temporary primordial manifestation. Duration, unknown. Aftermath, total reset to Shallow's tier. Proceed. Yes. His body dissolved. It didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. His flesh became seawater. His bones became current, his consciousness expanded outward in a rushing tide that swallowed the harbor, the cliffs, the entire coastline. He was the spray on Yance's face. He was the waves lifting the evacuation boats. He was the crushing pressure in the deep where monsters were born. He was the ocean, and the ocean was furious. The tidal wave bearing down on the village froze mid-crash. 300 tons of water simply stopped, trembling in defiance of gravity, then reversed course, slamming into the leviathan that had summoned it. The beast imploded, not crushed, compressed. Hadding's will wrapped around it like a fist made of abyssal pressure, squeezing until a creature the size of a temple became a sphere of meat and bone no larger than a fist. The second leviathan tried to dive. The water rejected it. Hadding was the water, and he refused to let it flee. Current became chains. Pressure became a blade. The monster split cleanly in half from nose to tail. The razor fins simply ceased to exist, their bodies flash-boiled. As Hadding superheated the water around them, silence fell over the harbor. Then Hadding's voice spoke from everywhere, from the waves, from the rain, from the moisture in the Pale Warden's own translucent flesh. You woke the wrong fisherman. The drowned lord's expression cycled through shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like joy. A mortal achieving primordial manifestation through a dead god's heart. Its bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter. I must have you. I must consume you. The power you represent, it attacked. The Pale Warden stopped playing. It manifested its true domain, the crushing weight of the abyssal deep, pressure that existed at depths where light had never reached, where stone flowed like water, and water became something closer to metal. A sphere of impossible gravity expanded outward, flattening buildings, cracking stone, forcing Chunwu and Yansu to their knees. Hadding met it with the full force of Ocean's inheritance. Two domains collided. The shockwave rewrote geography. Cliffs crumbled. The harbor floor cracked open, revealing tunnels that hadn't seen air in millennia. The collision's pressure wave expanded outward at the speed of sound, rolling across the sunken reach, rattling windows in cities 300 miles away. Every cultivator within 1,000 miles felt it. Every power-sensing artifact in the region screamed warnings. Something had just broken the world's rules. In the eye of the collision, where Hadding's will and the Pale Warden's domain ground against each other like continental plates, Elder Mokran's voice whispered from the dissolving fragments of the Aqua Key. You didn't just reach primordial, Hadding. The system flickered in his expanded consciousness, characters reshaping themselves into something he'd never seen before. You exceeded it. Warning, tears ceiling broken, my disciple. Classification, origin. You've become something the world has never seen. The Pale Warden's domain pressed inward, trying to crush this impossible mortal who had somehow become an ocean. Hadding pressed back. He was water now, every drop in the harbor, every wave crashing against the cliffs, every tear streaming down Yansu's face. As she watched from the ruined dock, he felt the Drowned Lord's techniques like crude imitations, a child splashing in puddles, while claiming to command the sea. You think you understand pressure? Hadding's voice came from everywhere. The spray, the foam, the rain beginning to fall. I've carried 135 years of it. He reversed the crushing force. The Pale Warden's own domain collapsed inward, folding the creature's translucent form like wet paper. Bioluminescent veins burst. That beautiful, wrong face contorted. Impossible, it gurgled. Mortals cannot. Hadding didn't let it finish. He wrapped the harbor's water around the drowned lord and squeezed. Centuries of hidden guilt became pressure. Decades of watching friends die of old age became weight. The loneliness of immortality among mayflies became a force that could crack the world's foundation. The Pale Warden's form imploded. Its scream echoed across dimensions, a sound that would give Saltmire's children nightmares for generations. But even as it died, it laughed. The other lords will know your name. It howled through collapsing vocal cords. You cannot hide from the deep forever, origin bearer. They will come. They will all come. Hadding dragged what remained of the drowned lord down, through the harbor floor, through bedrock, through layers of sediment accumulated over millennia, and hurled it into the abyssal trenches where even light feared to travel. The presence vanished. The tide-borne army, suddenly masterless, went still. Razor fins floated belly up. The leviathans groaned and sank beneath the waves, their borrowed will extinguished. 1,000 monsters died in the span of 3 heartbeats. Then Hadding felt the cost. The system's warning flared across his consciousness. Ocean's inheritance complete. Cultivation reset initiated. His body began to solidify, water becoming flesh, infinite becoming finite, God becoming man. The aqua key around his neck cracked, its glow dying like a candle in a hurricane. His legs gave out. The doc rushed up to meet him, but someone caught him first. Strong arms, salt-sprayed clothes, the smell of fish and determination. Yansu. She lowered him to the blood-slicked wood, her face a war between fury and wonder. Her hand was shaking. His were too. You were this powerful the whole time. Her voice cracked. All those years you watched us struggle against storms, against monsters, against starvation. You could have stopped all of it. Hadding looked up at the young woman who reminded him so much of disciples he'd outlived a century ago. He wanted to explain about the hunters who'd killed his sect, about the Abyssal Church's assassins, about how staying hidden was the only way to protect. No more excuses. I was afraid to be found, he said simply. I'm not afraid anymore. Yansu's grip on his shoulders tightened. For a moment, he thought she might hit him. Instead, she pulled him into an embrace so fierce his old bones protested. Then, teach me, she whispered against his shoulder. Whatever that was, teach me to do it. Footsteps approached. Chunwoo limped toward them, his lightning harpoon dragging behind him like a child's toy. His monster-scale armor was cracked. His handsome face was bloody. But it was his eyes that had truly changed. The arrogance had been cauterized out of them, replaced with something raw. He stopped 3 feet away. Then the Tide Hunter who had mocked old Hadding. as a senile fisherman dropped to his knees. His forehead touched the bloody dock. "Teach me." His voice broke. "Whatever you are, whatever that was, I've spent my whole life thinking I was strong. I just watched you kill a drowned lord. Well, I couldn't even scratch a leviathan." He looked up, tears cutting through the grime on his face. "Teach me to protect people like you just did. Please." Hadding's system flickered weakly in his peripheral vision. His stats were gone. All 4 attributes reset to Shallow's tier, barely above mortal. 135 years of accumulated power, spent in a single battle. But the knowledge remained. The techniques. The understanding of what true cultivation meant. He'd have to start over. From nothing. The thought should have devastated him. Instead, Hadding felt something he hadn't experienced in over a century. Excitement. Dawn broke over Saltmire. Golden light spilled across the ruined harbor, illuminating a scene of impossible victory. Monster corpses choked the water, razor fins and tide-borne creatures, and the massive, deflating forms of dead leviathans. Survivors emerged from basements and boats, blinking at a world that shouldn't still exist. The village was broken. Half the buildings were rubble. The dock where Hadding said would need to be completely rebuilt. But the people were alive. Hadding pushed himself upright with Yansu's help. His body felt ancient now. Not the preserved age of an immortal, but the genuine weight of years he'd held at bay for so long. He walked to the dock's edge and looked out at the horizon. Dozens of ships, coming fast. His enhanced senses were gone, but he didn't need them to know what those vessels carried. Cultivators from every surviving sect, drawn by the shockwave of Origin tier power. Abyssal church fanatics who'd felt their god die. Regional lords seeking the weapon that could kill drowned lords. Opportunists, hunters, enemies, all coming for him. "More trouble?" Yansu asked, stepping up beside him. "More than you can imagine." Hadding should have felt afraid. He should have been calculating escape routes, planning disappearances, preparing to run like he'd run for 135 years. Instead, he thought about the 2 people standing at his sides, about the village behind him, about disciples. His system flickered one final time, displaying characters he'd never seen before. New cultivation cycle initiated. Starting tide points, 1. Time to rebuild. Note, Origin tier achieved once. Path remembered. Second ascension possible. Hadding smiled. "Yansu." Chunwoo. He didn't look away from the approaching fleet. "How would you like to learn from the last master of the tidal cultivation system?" The ships grew larger on the horizon. Flags snapped in the wind, sect banners, naval insignias, and one black sail bearing the symbol of a drowned crown. The Abyssal Church's flagship, and standing at its bow, visible even at this distance, was a figure that made Hadding's newly mortal heart stutter. White robes, the aqua key hanging at her neck. Elder Makran smiled across the water, very much alive, and the voice that had guided his transformation echoed in his memory with new, terrible meaning. "You've become something the world has never seen," she had said. What Hadding heard now was what she hadn't said. "Something I've been waiting 135 years to harvest."